very small. Hi and welcome back to the channel. I'm Steven, today with a scale figure review. You are looking at Kotobukiya's 1/7 scale Saber class version of Astolfo from Fate Grand Order. Well, before I proceed even further, this is a very important piece of information I need to share with you guys in case you don't know anything about the Fate series. This is a male character. This is a dude. This is a trap, a fanboy, right? And for someone like me who doesn't really collect male character figures that much, I would still happily buy Astolfo figures because dude is like a best bro in FGO. I like his personality a lot. Yeah. Okay, so back to the figure over here. This scale figure came out like 6 months ago, back in October 2023, for an eye-watering 27,000 yen or so, which is exceptionally expensive for a scale figure by Kotobukiya, right? And I had major reservations on buying this for the full retail price of 27k because I don't value Kotobukiya that highly as a figure brand. And secondly was that, personally, I would wait at least 3 to 6 months before buying a FGO figure that has just been released because 80% of the time they will bargain bin. Like, I got Max Factory's RSG Gal for 14,000 yen instead of 20 plus thousand yen. Good Smiles Moderate was 17,000 yen when I bought it instead of 23k or so. The list just goes on. Like, a lot of FGO figures become very cheap a few months after release. So I thought I could go with the same strategy with this figure of Astolfo, and that nearly cost me. Like, it is almost a costly mistake. I forgot to factor in something very simple, and that is Astolfo is one of the most popular FGO characters even in Japan. And it is not really an understatement to even say that at some point he is even more popular than even the original Saber Artoria. So a lot of Saber Artoria figures, regardless of which version, the value will tank after a release. Astolfo, that doesn't apply to him. Alright, let me bring in Amakuni's Astolfo over here. As you can see, massive size difference, but we'll get to that in a second. Amakuni's Astolfo isn't easy to find. It is quite expensive if you find one in Mandarake nowadays. Well, I mean, if you compare it to the fact that this came out so many years ago, the value barely declines at all. And even the Aniplex version, which is the least popular version as far as I'm aware of, because it is based on the Fate Apocrypha art style, which is not everyone's cup of tea. There are perhaps only 3 scale figures of Astolfo at the moment. Yeah, just these 3. And this Kotobukiya one is the only scale figure of him under the Saber class. Yeah, I mean, there are only 3 scale figures and the other 2 were pretty popular back then, so I forgot to take that into account. So waiting 3 months, 4 months later, when I decided to check out his price, his value has skyrocketed in Japan. At least for the limited edition, the Kotobukiya online exclusive version, which comes with an extra faceplate that I don't really care about, to be honest. That version is over 40,000 yen in Amazon Japan. And recently a friend of mine, let me show you guys the screenshot right here as the evidence. He went to Japan, right, for a holiday, a vacation. He looked for this figure of Saber Astolfo, only to find out he goes for 40,000 to 50,000 yen, and he said, nope, I'm not buying him at this price. So this figure is insanely valued right now, very overvalued at the moment, especially in Japan. So I thought, never mind, I would go to Taobao in China and find one. Over in China, while the situation is not as bad as in Japan, the value is not dropping at all. Like, the regular version is still selling for the normal official retail price of about 27,000 yen equivalent. And the exclusive version, assuming can find one, is at least 33,000 yen equivalent. So I was thinking, no, I shouldn't wait any longer. I acquired one of these figures, the regular version is good enough, from Taobao China for the official retail price tag of 27,000 yen. So that is the history, my history with this figure over here. I nearly made a costly mistake. Should I have waited even longer, he would be even harder to find at a normal price tag. I do feel a bit salty about paying a full 27,000 yen for a Kotobukiya figure, but the longer I wait, the worse it gets, so it is not like I have much of a choice at this point. Before I move on to the details of this figure, a quick mention about the unboxing and assembly process. First thing, I took the figure out from the carton box. I was surprised by how big this figure is. Like, you guys can see, in comparison to the Amakuni version, how much bigger this is. Like, are they even the same scale, right? So I was quite pleased by the size of the figure. After all, she says bigger is better. The next thing was that the assembly process appeared a lot more intimidating than I expected. But as long as I followed the instruction sheet properly, there wasn't much of an issue. Like, everything was pretty straightforward, and I am very happy to see the figure not being permanently glued to the base, which is something Kotobukiya does way too often to their many other figures, right? Not the case for this figure. However, no metal foot peg over here, only a single thick plastic block, which I hope is enough to support the weight of this figure, right? Not that I am surprised at all. Like, Kotobukiya often glues their figures permanently to the base because they wanted to avoid letting you guys know they don't use metal foot pegs to save cost, right? That is something they have been doing for the past decade or so. Nothing new over here. And then the second thing was that when I took the figure out from the box, the assembly process, or at least it appears to be a lot more intimidating than I expected, right? But as long as you follow the instruction sheet, everything was very straightforward. Like, no difficulties in putting the parts together. Everything fits just nicely. However, I am unhappy with this one single peg over here. This supporting peg, yeah, between Astolfo's hair and the sword, where this peg is just way too loose. I don't know if it is intentional or this is a quality control oversight. I do agree with Kotobukiya not making this peg too tight because you will break it very easily. It is just a very thin plastic peg, but at the same time, this is just way too loose. I want it to fit a bit better, right? So I am disappointed about this part over here, but everywhere else, I think the tightness feels just nice. Moving on to the sculpting of this figure. Sculpting is something Kotobukiya has never had any trouble with, right? I am very happy with the figure in terms of the sculpting department. Like, I could not find any flaw at all. This figure looks exactly as advertised in their official product pictures, and there are no sculpt related flaws such as ugly seam lines or glue stains. I can't find any on my sample over here, on my unit over here. So the sculpting is like a 9 or 9.5 out of 10 easily, right? The detail level is pretty competent and it is above your typical average Kotobukiya figure. As for the face of this figure, I'm happy with it. I don't have any issues at all, very accurate. And I know the Kotobukiya exclusive version, you get a different faceplate where he has his signature wink and smiling face. I am fine without that because I got my hands on the limited edition of Miyamoto Musashi by Kotobukiya, where she has the same exact face expression as this Astolfo. So I would display this Astolfo with this normal faceplate and the Musashi with the wink faceplate for some variety. So I'm happy with what I got over here, not an issue to me. Moving on to the painting department of this figure, this is where I will explain why I am unwilling to pay 27,000 yen for a Kotobukiya figure, any Kotobukiya figure for the matter. To make things clear, quality control is excellent, impeccable even. Like, I could not find any quality control related issues like paint transfer, paint scratches, uneven surface, which even some good small figures have the issue, and paint bleeding. None of that over here. Like, Kotobukiya did a fabulous job with the painting department. So maybe when you look at it this way, the price is plenty justified, though I still believe that there is a massive FGO tax being slapped on this figure. But I am bringing in this Amakuni figure of Astolfo for today's review for a very good reason. Now, before I move on, a disclaimer over here. this is not a normal Amakuni figure, right? This is a quality control rejected figure from factory. I bought this for under $40 including shipping. Yeah, this is a factory QC rejected item with no box. I bought this loose, $40, and there are some issues on the back of his cape over here where you can find some scratches which you will normally not find in any proper figure by Amakuni, right? This was rejected, not supposed to be sold, by the way. However, what I want to compare over here is the hair of the figure, where Amakuni seems to have finished painting it. Like, just compare it side by side, you will immediately notice a massive difference in the level of detail. Kotobukiya's version of Astolfo, it is just glossy pink color with barely any shading. But you look at Amakuni's version over here, how many shades of pink or magenta can you see on his hair? You can see bright and medium pink on the top over here, and then at the very edges of the hair strand, very obvious, the pink or magenta becomes darker, right? But Kotobukiya just never do shading on their figures. Like, they do the bare minimum. At least it feels that way to me. And the second thing was that the finish on the paint, this Amakuni figure over here, the finish is excellent. It is like matte finish but very smooth on the surface. Kotobukiya's Astolfo over here, the paint finish on the hair is way too glossy, way too shiny, and I don't like it. It makes the figure feel cheap when it is not cheap at all. I mean, comparing high quality plastic to cheap plastic, I'm sure you guys can relate. Cheap plastic tend to feel very glossy and plasticky, right? Like the surface is very shiny. And then the higher quality plastics, sometimes, yeah, the surface is a bit matte in finish. I mean, compare genuine and bootleg Gunpla. There is a very obvious difference over there as well. I'm aware that this is something completely subjective. Some of you will prefer gloss, some will prefer matte finish. But to me, it feels like this kind of gradient paintwork, shading paintwork, complete with a smooth matte finish surface, feels higher quality. It feels more premium. And a finish like this, a gloss finish with barely any shading, reminds me of some of those cheaper plastic used in bootleg figures or Gunpla, right? That is the impression I'm having over here. So I am unhappy about this part, yet at the same time, I totally expected it already. Yeah. And lastly, on the base of this figure, right? Okay, Kotobukiya is no stranger to doing diorama bases, and I actually like what I am getting over here. This moon surface base, right, moon crater base in a way, looks really nice, and there is actually some decent levels of shading. So I would say I have no complaints on the base of the figure. The only issue, once again, is that I wish that we got a couple of metal foot pegs for the base over here, but the figure is not too heavy. Maybe he will do fine in the long term without a metal foot peg, despite standing on one single leg. The most unhappy thing I am with this figure is that back behind here, way too loose. Yeah. So arriving at the conclusion of this review today, can I recommend this figure? The answer is a big yes, right? Most of my negative opinions of this figure is something subjective. I'm well aware of that, and I have no intention of forcing the same views on you guys watching this video. Yeah, so pick one up when you still can before he gets too expensive. Until then, if you found this video to be helpful in any way, please give this video a like, a thumbs up, and subscribe to this channel for more figure reviews like this, and also figure news every week. Until then, I'll see you guys again very soon. Goodbye.